You are aware, I'm sure, that Scientific American is a science publication that hasn't been very sciencely of late. This is one of the more interesting facts in life is how woke ideology is increasingly pervasive in parts of our society that it used to not be in, including the sciences. To reiterate something I said, and I really, this has to be emphasized. Every living thing in the world, every living thing is classified scientifically. And the typical way that I learned as a kid, and it's changed a little bit, but it's still kind of the same. King Philip came over from Great Spain. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So human beings are in the animal kingdom. There are plants, there are microbes, there are animals. We're in the animal kingdom. We are multicellular, therefore we're plant or animal. We are living and have brains, and we move about. Therefore, we're animals. We're not plants. We're not rooted into the ground. We're in the chordata phylum. Why? Because of all the animals that are out there, we have spinal cords, and the chordata is about those who have the semblance of some sort of spinal cord. Of the spinal corded animals, we are in the class that are mammals. Why? Because, well, we're not birds. We don't have wings. We're not fish living under the sea. We are mammals, so we walk about the earth, and we have mammary glands. The female species within the mammal class produces milk. Dolphins are a chorded animal that are mammals. The female produces milk even though they're in the ocean. They are air-breathing with spinal cords, and they're in the class of mammals. They're not amphibians. They're not reptiles. They're mammals. And then we are primates. Within the class of mammals, we're in the order of primates. And primates tend to walk upright, tend to have larger brains, tend to have greater visual acuity with a reduced sense of smell, and then opposable thumbs. And then of those, we're in the hominids. Hominids in particular walk upright with their rear off the ground. Many of them are land-dwelling, not tree-dwelling. We're hominids. And then we're in the genus Homo, of which we are the last surviving species. Now, here's what's notable. In that whole classification, when you get to mammals, there is not a order, family, genus, or species within the class of mammals that can swap sexes. So males cannot become females. And in fact, among Homo sapiens, the only way for you to even pretend to do that is copious amounts of drugs and surgery. The idea that men and women are socially constructed orders is outside of science. It's nonsense. It's gobbledygook. It's pseudoscience. Even within the class of mammals, the females bear children and produce milk, and the male does not. Within mammals, there is a distinction between male and female. It's not socially created. You reflect this in nature. Despite the copious amounts of pseudoscience documentaries NBC News wishes to produce with gay monkeys and chimpanzees and transsexual or transgender zebras, it's not actually so. They just make it up to try to justify themselves. And Scientific America is a magazine that is supposed to be scientific, and it has embraced the pseudoscience to embrace a progressive agenda. And now Scientific America is embracing the rest of the pseudoscientific agenda of the progressives. And here is the story from no less than the editors of the publication itself. The people who believe that you can have transgender penguins want you to know, quote, children deserve uniform standards in homeschooling. With few states tracking who is being homeschooled and what they are learning, an untold number of U.S. students are at risk of a poor education or even abuse. The number of children being educated at home has been growing for the past few decades. No one knows by how much, and that is part of the problem. Homeschooling is barely tracked or regulated in the United States, but children deserve a safe and robust education, whether they attend a traditional school or are educated at home. A safe and robust education where you can learn the gender unicorn. That's right. You know, my daughter, when she went for a review of Georgia Tech for one of the major engineering departments, had to go sit in the LGBTQ plus safe space, talk pronouns to a woman who was wearing an Ask Me About My Pronouns button and had a poster of the gender unicorn behind her. Very science-y. The National Center for Education Statistics reported that by last count in 2019, nearly 3% of U.S. students, 1.5 million, were being homeschooled. This number, calculated from a nationwide survey, is surely an undercount because the homeschooling population is notoriously hard to survey, and more children have been homeschooled since the COVID pandemic began. Why do you think that is, Scientific America? Maybe it's because the scientific community was telling people we got to shut schools down in America? 11 states do not require parents to inform anyone they're homeschooling a child. And in most of the country, once a child has exited the traditional schoolroom environment, no one checks to ensure they're receiving an education at all. You know, when Brian Kemp in Georgia was asked about shutting schools down in the state, he was under enormous pressure to do so. And one of his major concerns about shutting down public schools was the number of kids who might be abused at home. And he didn't want kids to be home all day if they were in an abusive environment. And he was roundly mocked by progressives for raising that concern. And now here comes the progressives at Scientific American saying kids might be home being abused by their parents, and how would we ever know? Kids are getting abused in schools. Kids are getting shot up in schools. In public schools, the public schools are failing. You people don't want school choice, and now you don't want homeschool. You want everyone forced to be in a public school where you can teach them about the gender unicorn instead of ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Condi Rice was at a Reagan forum, and she was asked about school choice in the country. Listen to this.
So are you for school choice or not? We already have a choice system in education. If you are of means, you will move to a district where the schools are good and the houses are expensive, like Palo Alto, California. If you go across the street from Stanford, Palo Alto High has a performance arts center that looks like a smaller version of Stanford's. If you're really wealthy, you will send your kids to private schools. So who's stuck in failing neighborhood schools? Poor kids. A lot of them minority kids. So how can you say you're for civil rights? How can you say you're for the poor when you're condemning those children to not being able to read? By the time they're in 3rd grade, they're never going to read. So if you want to say that school choice and vouchers and charter schools are destroying the public schools, fine. You write that editorial in the Washington Post, but then don't send your kids to Sidwell Friends.
Amen, amen, amen. Listen to this. This is Scientific America. Again, an organization that has rejected science for the pseudoscience zeitgeist of the left these days. It is clear that homeschooling will continue to lack accountability for outcomes or even basic safety in most states. But federal mandates for reporting and assessment to protect children doesn't need to be onerous. For example, homeschool parents could be required to pass an initial background check, as every state requires for K through 12 teachers. Homeschool instructors could be required to submit documents every year to their local school district or to a state agency to show their children are learning. What? Federal mandates don't need to be onerous. We're just going to make parents have a background check before they're allowed to teach their kids. So the parents that the kids come home to at night every day, you don't think the kids should be able to stay home with them in the day because they might be abused. What happens? The parents turn off the abuse switch at night. Abuse could happen anywhere. Abuse is happening in public schools. Every single day there's a story out about that. Do you know, here's the thing that even you have to concede, and in fact, you do concede it in your piece. Listen to this. Homeschool students have won the National Spelling Bee. One was the most prolific mathematician in history. Many are well-rounded and well-adjusted kids, and some suffer horrific abuse. Using the abuse to say all parents need background checks, this is where the left is headed. If Joe Biden wins again, you know they're coming for your homeschoolers. They end with this. Education is a basic human right. We need to make sure kids have chances to investigate what makes them curious, study history and science and reading, and ask questions and learn from others. We want them to reach adulthood ready to take on the world. You know, the average homeschooler is more ready to take on the world than the average public school student in the United States. You people show no concern at all for the kids stuck in failing public schools. You just don't like the fact that parents might keep their kids home and away from your ability to indoctrinate them into progressivism. This isn't scientific America. This is pseudoscience nonsense brought to you by a once popular publication that's decided to embrace wokeism to their detriment. And now they want to force it on you and your kids. People, you need to pay attention to this. It's not hyperbole. These are the editors of Scientific American. They are coming for your children.